Welcome, everyone. Let me ask you to take your seats. We'll begin part two of our conversation. Again, I'm Damon Wilson, Executive Vice President of the Atlantic Council, and we're here for a town hall conversation, an update on Afghanistan, now for a look from a regional perspective. And we couldn't be joined by a more extraordinary group of panelists here. I'm delighted to welcome to our town hall the Foreign Minister of Pakistan. We're delighted to have Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi with us. Welcome. The Foreign Minister of Uzbekistan, Abdulaziz Kamilov, welcome. The National Security Advisor to the President of Afghanistan as well, Hamdullah Mohib, welcome as well. And we're delighted to be joined by former Secretary of State and U.S. Senator and former presidential candidate John Kerry. We're delighted to have you in the House with us today. Ambassador Mohib, this is about Afghanistan. And we've just heard Secretary Kerry bring this back to very personal in terms of the deaths that have been inflicted in your country, about the uncertainty of the Taliban intentions in this process. So are they just trying to wait out an American administration, American president who signaled that we want to withdraw? And we've heard from Minister Qureshi, an authoritative delegation, but is the Taliban that's meeting with Ambassador Khalilzad, able to deliver on those terms?
Well, thank you. Let me first pay tribute to the thousands of Americans who have lost their lives in Afghanistan and also NATO troops. It's not just an Afghan war. Let me also extend sympathies from this platform to India for what they went through just yesterday. Terrorism is an enemy that is haunting our entire region. But if we are down to just the specifics of Afghanistan, this is not a country of 2002. Most people have the nostalgia to go back and fix what went wrong in 2002 and think that that would fix it. But Afghanistan has come a long way thanks to the support of our partners. This is both tangibly and intangibly a different country that is contending with its own future. We are perhaps at a crossroad where we could make significant progress if we were to be able to bring everybody together, to move towards peace, and I think our neighbors play a very constructive role. Uzbekistan is a role model for us for what they did at Tashkent following Kabul conference and the values that you stand for. But from where I sit, it's about a purpose. I've listened to numerous conversations of attacks at checkposts throughout the country. And the radio calls that these soldiers make to their base, it'd bring anyone to tears. These people are not fighting for $300 or the 15,000 AFs that we give them. They're fighting for a purpose. The Taliban, on the other hand, have lost that. The population is moving away. Since the discussions on the peace talks began, and there was some level of anxiety in Afghanistan, and understandably so, that perhaps the Afghan state may be bypassed. The thousands of people that have come and contacted the government has all been about the protection of the Islamic Republic. It's about the values these people fight for each day. Every day we have numerous sacrifices, and international newspapers cover it as casualties. Those are not casualties. Those are sacrifices we make on behalf of our country, for our freedoms, for our sovereignty, and for the values we stand. And we will continue to make that for as long as we have Afghanistan and for as long as there is a single Afghan left. Everyone knows that we take our sovereignty extremely seriously. Our neighbors know, everybody around, but they sometimes forget. They think if only they could push it a little further. Afghanistan still stands. It's not a nation that was invented. It's a nation that was built. After 117 years, we made contact again with Uzbekistan and our Central Asian neighbors. This is now a new region, new political dynamics. We are not a landlocked country. And we're not looking to be a landlocked country. We're looking to be the connector between South and Central Asia for a source of prosperity and for a source of development. The motto that Afghanistan has and the goal that we aspire to be that we are in the making of, is to be a place where people, ideas, and goods flow freely. I emphasize the freely part because it's free of terrorism, but it's also free of prejudice and free of our imposition of ideas. The imposed war that we are currently fighting in Afghanistan is on behalf of everybody, including the United States, but Europe and everyone that would be impacted right immediately from the fact. So the reason I brought up what happened yesterday in India was because of the source of the attack. The purpose and the inspiration came from what was and what is happening here, what is happening in Afghanistan today, and perhaps the misperception of what had been. Let me end by saying that peace is coming to Afghanistan. We will bring peace. We will bring peace. It is the ultimate desire and wish of the majority of the Afghan people. It is not going to be a simple process of a meeting or a facilitation. It's going to require all of us to involve and get engaged substantively to ensure that everybody's interests in the region who are involved in this conflict are taken care of, but also that it is a peace that is acceptable to the Afghan people who have just in the last 5 years made 45,000 sacrifices to protect the values that they are fighting for. And I'll go back to those recordings just for one example. I heard 24 soldiers, these were policemen that were attacked. The commander speaking to the base tells them that they are being overrun, that they didn't have enough ammunition, that that the attackers were larger in number. And the commander on the base says, you have several options. You can abandon. They say, no, we will fight until there is no one left here. And they did. The last bullet that killed the commander is when the conversation goes quiet. We find out in the morning that that base was overrun. But they didn't surrender, and they didn't run away. This is a story that is repeated every day. I come back to the purpose part. There is a purpose that the Afghans are fighting for. It's our freedoms and our values and our sovereignty. And we will not give up on that.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I want to turn now to all of you.
In the context of American politics today, how do Americans get the full picture of what's happened in Afghanistan and not come to a summary judgment that a rapid pullout is the right answer?
Two important questions about inside the peace negotiations, the American debate. Please start with you, Ambassador Mohib.
Well, the assumption when we talk about an intra-Afghan talk is, first of all, that there is equity between the Afghan government and what the groups that represent the insurgents. And the other is that this is really an Afghan issue alone. Now, we have begun consultative process on what is the price that the Afghans are prepared to pay for peace and what kind of compromises we're ready to make. We'll be holding our first consultative loya jirga on peace, which will bring together political parties, the public and influentials from across the country. For those of you who don't know what a loya jirga is the highest decision-making authority in Afghanistan. If the parliament or in the Senate cannot make and the government cannot make decisions, it goes up to the loya jirga. But consultative loya jirgas have a tone of its own in their, as the name defines it, consultative in its nature. But they bring legitimacy to an endorsement to what that mandate would be. The Afghan government, on behalf of its people as a republic, would like to hear from the Afghans on what it is that they're prepared to pay in terms of the price. If the fight was to evict foreign troops, there is actually no need for foreign troops in Afghanistan should there be no terrorism and no Taliban. Right? So we would have to work out what are those modalities and how do we realign our partnerships and friendships and with our neighbors, you know, Uzbekistan, Pakistan, Iran, and everybody else, on how do we see ourselves in that, and what can be the future of our governing look like. But I do want to address that it is not just an Afghan matter. We would like to see our neighbors involved. We would like to see everybody who is a stakeholder in this process. Minister Qureshi spoke about their influence on Taliban and how you were able to, you know, to bring them to make a team that's more definitive. It also shows the dependencies outside of what the Afghan government has. So we have dependencies that are confined or defined in the contracts, in the agreements, in the treaties that we have signed, that are ratified by our parliament and Senate. But the Taliban have some partnerships and some agreements that are not known to the Afghan people. An intra-Afghan dialogue would really need to look into that too, and what does that mean for us as a country put together. Right? We hope that we begin with the consultative lawyer Jirga to give us a mandate to go forward and explore some of those options.